when I was in the hospital, I wrote Marco and Gianna letters. I wrote in the letter, just because I'm no longer here doesn't mean that my love for you is gone. You need to not let this ruin your life. Life is short. Do not let losing your mom make you bitter. Don't be mad your entire life. Don't waste your life being mad about this.
Oh my goodness, Becky Attard. First of all, I'm so excited to see your gorgeous face. Like,
oh my gosh.
Let's start there. But real quick, before we even get going, like, you and I met at Lifetime, like what,
20 years ago.
20 years ago?
Yeah.
Bonding over teaching classes and healthy living. And I think maybe you were leading a certification or I was auditioning for something. I can't remember. I love that place. And I love you and the community and just the like-mindedness of like everybody being on the same page. I absolutely love it. And you have been such a great leader and role model in the health and wellness space for your entire life. Like, I love you. I absolutely love you. And I absolutely love seeing your face. And I cannot wait to dive in to all things cancer, healing, growing, radiation, supporting your friends along the way. But first, like, let's unpack. You are not cancer. Like, I think it's really hard for other people to understand. Like, Becky, remember that girl? She battled cancer. Like, remember her? This like brings up such trauma for me because I resented being attached to the identity of being a widow. Like when Jason passed away and people were like, Dana, I remember her? She's a widow. She's a widow. And I'm like, stop. I'm so much more than that. It would make me so angry because everyone just kind of puts you need a space. And so they put you in a space. So let's start at the way back and talk about your cancer journey because it's been a super long one. And I'm so grateful that you're here, that your heart is open, and that you're willing to share your journey to help those that come behind you.
So, first of all, I'm very excited to be here with you. And my emotions are already starting to come up because you just said you're not cancer.
Yeah, you're not.
And it's not who I am. It's something that I have dealt with and I have to deal with for the rest of my life, but it's not who I am. So I definitely want to go through the cliff notes of the past 4.5 years.
Yeah, please.
So people kind of know where I'm coming from. But before I do that, in the fall of 2022, I was laying on my couch. I had a broken neck. So that if people are watching, like that's why my neck is stiff. My C1 and C2 vertebrae had essentially exploded. T10 was cracked. L1 was cracked, L4 was cracked, my pelvis was cracked, and my femur was on the verge of collapse. Okay. So I'm laying on my couch. I've got this neck brace on, and the cancer was everywhere. It was in my shoulder. It was in my chest. And I was laying there, and I literally said to God, I was like, if you allow me to live, if you allow me to survive, like if you get me through this pit of hell, because that's where we were. I said, I almost made like a deal. I was like, I promise you, I will do my very best to tell my story so people can see you through me in my story.
Yeah.
And so being here with you today is just another example of God's faithfulness.
It's another example.
Right. So just super quick cliff notes.
Oh my gosh, I'm tearing up just for like a hot second. Like I'm tearing up and I love you so much. And I'm going to probably say that a million times. And I mean it. And I like see you through the Zoom, through the video that we're talking on. And I want to like jump over there and give you just like the biggest hug. And just like from my holistic, healthy fitness best friend to have been on this hellish journey of cancer, we have to go to the way back in the Cliff Notes version of finding out that you even had breast cancer to start with.
And I've done a ton of podcasts and I do a lot of Facebook posts and I'm writing a book and I often get mad at myself because when I just listened to a podcast, the last podcast I did, because I wanted to prepare for today and kind of get in the headspace of it. And I was listening to it while I was going through Costco and I get mad at myself because I often speak very lighthearted about it.
Yeah.
But I want people to know, like, a cancer journey is not for the faint of heart. Like,
Yeah.
I often talk to people, like people will be like, how are you doing? What's going on? And I talk to them and they get very uncomfortable. Just like I'm sure
Yeah.
you talk to people about your grief
Yeah.
and losing Jason, and people get like, whoa, like weirded out.
Yeah, they get weirded out, and it forces us, because you are very socially aware. You're aware of everyone else's feelings. You've got that quality, and I
Mm-hmm.
am as well. And a lot of us that want to make other people feel comfortable and want to make other people feel great, when we notice that they're uncomfortable in our journey, we step back. We're like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad.
Oh,
Right? And I think it's human nature,
yeah.
but it's something that we're breaking the stigma on that in this podcast, or in this conversation, because this is real and the feelings are real. And yeah, so bring us back to the beginning and leave it unfiltered.
So March 2020. And if you think back to March of 2020, what was happening? It was COVID shutdown.
Yeah.
We came home. So that was March, April, and then May happened. And I did a workout. And in the middle of the workout, I was like, wow, there's this very large lump like popping out of my chest. And I showed Fred. And fast forward to June 23rd of 2020, I got the call, you have breast cancer. So August 12th, I had a double mastectomy. After the double mastectomy, I got an infection. I was in the hospital for a week, had a surgery when I was there. After that, we did 4 rounds of chemo. During chemo, this was the fall of 2020. All of us got COVID. Then we moved into 28 sessions of radiation, 2 more breast reconstruction surgeries, and that took us to the fall of 2021. And I remember when I got done with my last breast reconstruction surgery, I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. We just went through 15 months because that's when COVID was like heavy duty, right?
Yeah.
2020. And in the midst of this, I'm like having surgeries and chemo and radiation. And I remember telling God how tired I was. Yeah. And I was like, God, I am just obliterated.
Yeah.
So that was the fall of 2021. And then fast forward to the spring of 2022. And I was like having this neck pain and this back pain. I went to see a chiropractor. I thought I had pulled muscles. I was like, what the heck is going on? Fast forward, got x-rays. They sent me to the ER. And they're like, your C1 and C2 vertebrae are showing that they're cracked. And I don't want to get...
How?
So people always ask, they're like, how in the world does cancer do that? Cancer in your bones is like termites in wood.
Oh.
So it was in my bones and it was basically eating away at my skeletal system. So it climbed up my spine and basically exploded C1 and C2. So I walk into the ER. I'm like makeup on, Lululemon clothes. Like I look like a normal human, because most people, they're in the ER and they're like, vomiting or bleeding out.
Yeah.
And the girl's at the desk and she doesn't even look up at me. She's like typing and she like looks up at me out of the corner of her eye. She goes, what are you here for? Like I have a broken nail, right?
Yeah.
I said, I had x-rays yesterday. I said, it's showing C1, C2 fracture. I said, so they sent me here. She goes, don't move. I go, oh. I was like, okay, right. So long story short, they admitted me to the hospital.
You had driven yourself there?
Fred drove. But I was driving. Like I was like kind of living normal. I was like, gosh, how did I injure myself? Like what is going on with my neck? What is going on with my back? Like the one regret I had in this whole journey is Fred and I should have gone to the ER like immediately because I knew I wasn't right. He knew I wasn't right.
Yeah.
But I thought, like, Dana, like after you hit like 35, like you can wake up and be like, gosh, what did I slept wrong? Gosh, my knee hurts, whatever.
Yeah. You weren't thinking that cancer was eating your bones.
No, never one time did it cross my mind. So I'm in the ER. I'm laying in a bed in the hallway of the ER, neck brace on, right? Because they immediately put me in a neck brace, which is a whole nother story. They take me for a scan. They come back. The girl comes to the side of my head. Like she didn't even like face me. She like said it in my ear. And she goes, your neck is broken. You have lesions all down your spine. You have fractures down your spine. And we're pretty sure your breast cancer jumped to your back. And I'm laying there and Fred like came to the side of the bed and the shock value at that point was like beyond.
My jaw's on the floor. The shock value right now in this conversation is beyond.
The shock value. And he's holding my hand. And I didn't even start crying at that point because I was like, it was like she told me I was pregnant with quadruplets. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he goes, babe, this is awesome. He goes, you're writing a book right now. He goes, you have like 3 chapters. He goes, here's where the story really gets good. And what did I go, excuse me, I have like 5 chapters, but thank you. I will agree. Here's where the story takes a turn.
Gosh, I love Freddie. I love your husband. The 2 of you. Like, yes, this is where the story gets good.
So they admitted me to the hospital, obviously, and then they wouldn't let him stay with me. They're like, your husband can't stay with you. So that night we knew it was bad. We didn't know how bad it was, but we said a prayer before he left. It was like 1 a.m. and he said, we're going to do whatever it takes. And I said, I promise. I promise you, I will do whatever it takes. And I kind of like went a little cray. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll cut off my leg. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like whatever. I got home from the hospital on a Friday. Monday morning was the kids' first day of school. We drop them off at school. We come back and I'm reading my ER discharge papers, and I get to a paper and the top of it says how to communicate to your friends and family what you want your funeral to be like.
Oh my gosh.
Do you want to be cremated? Who do you want to do the eulogy? Do you want to be buried? And I went like this. I put the sheet to the side and I walked into the kitchen and I go, and Fred turned around because he was making breakfast. We were on our way to the radiologist and he goes, what is wrong? I go, they gave me funeral planning papers.
Yeah.
So he grabs the funeral planning papers, looks at them. He goes, throw them away.
In the trash. Yeah, that's going in the trash.
And I crumpled them up and I threw them in the trash. Talk about something messing with your head. So
yeah,
we moved into what we call the 30 days of darkness, where it was 30 days of scans, blood work, MRI. I mean, you name it. I had to do a cervical fusion, and that was September 30th. And the neurosurgeon screwed a plate to the base of my skull, and then there's 2 titanium rods that screw into C4.
Okay.
But prior to that surgery on September 30th, I had to do a ton of testing because they had to make sure that I was strong enough to survive the surgery, because the surgery is like
no joke.
No joke. I honestly, if I had to do it again, if my life depended on it, I could probably do it again, but it was hell. I'm going to be honest with you. It was a night, and it was a nightmare. So we do the cervical fusion September 30th. 4 weeks later, I start 18 rounds of chemotherapy.
For the second time.
18 rounds, right.
Yeah.
So I've never really doubted myself that much in my life. But at that point, after the cervical fusion, I mean, I couldn't stand in the kitchen and make my kids mac and cheese. Going to the bathroom was difficult. Taking a shower was incredibly difficult. And I'm like, and I got to start 18 rounds of chemotherapy.
Yeah.
But we did it. And we got through the 18 rounds. There was a lot of emergency room visits. We had a 3 a.m. ambulance ride. Like, there was a lot of nonsense. But we did it. So April 2023 comes. We go in for our final results. And my doctor was like, your levels are down. The chemo worked. The radiation worked. You're stable. We're on cruise control. So that was April of 2023. Fast forward to the spring of 2024. So this past spring. So it's May. Mm-hmm. My numbers jumped. So immediately you go back into the scanning machines, like immediate.
Yeah.
There was a spot in my chest. There was a spot in my arm. So immediately I went back on the radiation table. 10 more sessions of radiation. I had my 44th session of radiation on my 44th birthday. So needless to say, I was like back on the radiation table, and I pretty much cried the whole day.
Yeah.
My numbers didn't drop. So like fast forward, my numbers were still high, which they should have dropped after the radiation. My PA calls and she was like, what is going on with you? Your numbers are still high. Where are you having pain? And I was like, okay, I said, my low back and my hips are hurting. We immediately did a lumbar MRI. They called that afternoon. They said, you need to come in the office immediately. And that's never a good sign.
Right. Never.
So I go in the office and I am like literally shaking because I know I'm like, something is very, very wrong here. So there was 2 nodules at the end of my spinal cord, which which could potentially mean that there was cancer in my spinal fluid. So they admitted me to the hospital immediately. We did brain MRI, full spinal MRI, and then they did a spinal tap. And the darkness around that time, like my oncologist told me, he said, if you have cancer in your spinal fluid, he said, I'm running out of options for you. So we knew, we were like, and if there, and it ended up being negative. So they sent me home from the hospital, but then I had to do a second spinal tap because they needed 2 or 3 negatives to make sure. But if there was cancer in my spinal fluid, I would have had to do like a brain surgery, and then they would have administered the chemo through a port in my brain. But we didn't have to go that route because it was negative. And then we did 10 more sessions of radiation on my spinal cord to get rid of those nodules. And here we are. It's November of 2024.
And you're alive, smiling, and willing to share your story.
Like with a dry mouth because I just spoke for like 20 minutes.
Yes, but let's first of all, applaud you. And we have to dive into the how do you have the strength to get through that? Because chemotherapy and radiation are not for the weak of heart. And I think people think, okay, I have cancer. I'm going to knock this out. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to get radiation and I'm going to get chemotherapy and I'm going to knock this out. And then I'm going to put this behind me and I'm just going to get back to living. Like
that was Becky Attard, June of 2020 to the fall of 2021. I was like, give me the steps. Like my mind is very task oriented, very linear. I was like, get me to the finish line so I can like close this chapter and throw it away.
And then get back to teaching 19 classes a week and being the boss of everything that I want to be the boss of. So for the woman that's listening, that's like, okay, that's not how it works. Or wait, is that not how it works? Like, let's unpack that for a moment.
So number one, everyone's journey is different.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that their mothers had breast cancer 25 years ago. And they had a lumpectomy and some radiation, and it's been great ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know people all too well, they get diagnosed with cancer and they're gone a few weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
So it's everyone's journey is so different. Everyone's limitations are so different. And I told Freddie the other day, I said, everyone thinks, because we were talking about the guy on the Texans that had leukemia that was back on the NFL field. And I was watching the Lions game and I totally started crying. And I said, here's this kid. He's probably in his 20s. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
He went through leukemia and he's back on the NFL field. And sometimes going to the grocery store is difficult for me. I'm like, so seeing him is very inspiring, but it was also very humbling because I was like, oh gosh. And my husband, he goes, babe, number one, he's probably 25 years younger than you. He said, number two, he's a professional athlete. And number three, he goes, you have no idea what his cancer journey was like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we all want to compare and contrast.
Right.
And we want to say, well, your cancer versus my cancer versus whatever. But I love that he's an inspiration and you're also a professional athlete. Like, aren't we all professional athletes in our own doing?
Wait, and I get so mad sometimes because I had a friend have a biopsy and she called me and we spoke through a few things and she's like, we. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You're not me. Like, you had a biopsy and it was negative. Like, stop.
Yeah.
You know, so just like you said, you get angry when people call you a widow. Like I get angry when people are like, oh, my cancer journey, it was a month and it's done. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not even, I think one of the things that you've done really well is you don't claim it as this is, my cancer. You're like, I have this cancer in my body and God is going to get me through this. Let's talk a moment about your strength and why do you think or how, share with us how have you been able to withstand for real? It's hell. Going through the radiation and the chemo. I mean, I was only able to see, and granted, Jason died, but he went through a handful of chemo sessions and I watched him degrade mentally and physically because you're killing all of those cells in your body. Chemo is not taking an Advil for some pain. It's blasting your body.
So 2 things. One is you have to be careful who you surround yourself with when you're in like the depths of despair. If it wasn't for Fred, my husband, I truly believe I wouldn't have survived. Because when they gave me the funeral planning papers, I don't know if I've ever been more confused in my life.
Yeah.
Like I was very like, do I just accept this?
No.
Because my neck was so broken and so bad. Like there was this orthopedic surgeon that wouldn't touch me. So we had to be, which is a whole nother story. Like I have so many stories. But we were led to a neurosurgeon and he was like, no, I've got this. So that was like a miracle in itself. But Fred was the one that was like, no, babe. He was like, you are not, you know what I mean? Like this is not over. We are going to do whatever it takes. And I remember there was multiple times where I was like, oh no, like round 4. So I had the cervical fusion September 30th. 4 weeks later, we started the 18 rounds of chemo. So round 4 was like around Thanksgiving, give or take. And I remember they had to put in an extra bone strengthener because again, much of my skeletal system had been eaten away by the cancer. So I had holes all in my bones, right? So they put in an extra bone strengthener. So like I'm dying from the pain from the fusion because it was shortly after the fusion. They're pounding me with this chemotherapy and then they put in this extra bone strengthener. I come downstairs. Okay, it's the morning after round 4 of chemo. I come downstairs and my plan was, I'm going to go to the kitchen. I'm going to get some water and a snack and I'm going to go back to the couch. And I never made it to the kitchen because I looked at the couch and I was like, I'm just going to make a pit stop and just lay on the couch. So Fred stayed home from work that day because he knew how bad I was. And I was like, I was like pressing my face and like my arms and my legs against the cold leather because like that was the only comfort I could get because I was suffering so horribly. And he sat next to me on the couch and I don't even think I opened my eyes and he was like, babe, what's going on? Because I was like, okay, if this gets a little bit worse, we're going to have to go to the ER. And I said, I don't think I can do this 14 more times. And he didn't take a breath. I don't even think he blinked an eye. He goes, babe, you have to. And he said, babe, you have to. And at that moment, I was like free of my pity, if that makes sense. Like I was free of, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. You know what I mean? And I was like, I have to. And at that moment, I was like, if I can just lay here on the couch and just breathe until tomorrow, it'll be okay. And it was. And I literally probably got up twice to go to the bathroom. I don't know if I ate anything that day. That day was a big blur.
Yeah.
But then I woke up the next morning and I was like, okay, I can make myself some breakfast. And so you talk about the strength, Dana, number 1, it's one day at a time.
Yeah.
And when I say one day at a time, like I mean one day at a time.
And
then I read a quote the other day. It's okay to do less when you're dealing with more.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing that, and we talked about this earlier, is that's one thing that's been slightly irritating about this cancer journey is like, I'm like obliterated by the fusion. I'm in the middle of 18 rounds of chemotherapy. And like my family asked me, they're like, will you host Christmas?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh my God.
What? Like what? For real?
Yeah. And that's a little bit of an extreme example, and again, people don't understand.
They don't understand.
And I get it. But I was like literally laying on the couch going, dude, my whole life is like going to the bathroom, taking a shower, sleeping a lot. I remember Princess Catherine, who went through cancer. I read that she slept a lot of the day while the kids were at school. So that when they came home, she could eat dinner with them, help them with their homework. And then she was done. And I was like, yeah. Right.
That's real life. Like that's real life. And learning to do less when you're
dealing with more.
Yeah, that is so good. Learning to do less when you're dealing with more and learning to give yourself the grace to accept that. I think it's really hard for doers like you and like me to learn to do less when you're dealing with more because your brain is going 1,000 miles a minute. So can you share more about the grace that you have to give yourself in order to be like, Becky, it's okay?
Prior to all this, I lived a life of this is my to-do list.
Yeah.
And I will get it done no matter what. Yeah. And so having to adjust based on the surgeries, the fatigue from the radiation, the fatigue from the chemo, like that was huge.
Yeah.
So like there were a lot of days where I looked at my to-do list and I was like, okay, I have to take a shower.
Yeah.
I have to throw a load of laundry in. I have to do these other 2 things, and that's it. I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
And there was most of those days I really didn't have a choice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like after a cervical fusion, you're not like, oh, I'm choosing to not vacuum my whole house right now. Like you can't.
No, you're not. Yeah.
You can't even like stand up. You know what I mean? But you asked, you like talk about the strength and what it takes to get through. And we talked about this earlier, is I truly believe from the bottom of my heart, because I was having a complete freak out one day.
Yeah.
And my best friend said, I was like, I have spent my entire life being a fitness instructor, no drugs, no alcohol, eating right, like the whole 9. And then look what I've had to deal with. You know, my body, cancer, like what? And my best friend said, she said, but look how your body has tolerated the surgeries, the chemo. She goes, Becky, and I truly believe that how I lived my life prior to cancer and all the holistic stuff I did during treatment and even now is why I can function. Truly.
100%.
And I do some crazy holistic stuff. Like, and that's one thing too. A lot of people are just, what is it? Eastern or Western medicine. A lot of people are just holistic. I do both.
Yeah. So can you share more about the holistic things that you're doing? I know that you have been, how long have you been on mentibiotics? You've been doing the gut thing with me for, I think, the last 3 years.
I started the mentibiotics I remember it was after chemo. So yes, it's been about 3 years, because I remember you posted and you were like, oh, fatigue, cortisol, whatever. And I'm like, I can guarantee you the chemo has obliterated my gut.
Yeah.
So that's when I reached out to you. So that's when we started the mentibiotics.
Yeah.
I recently started the mood. That's been huge.
Yeah.
I love the mood. My son's now on the kids' mentibiotics.
Yep.
I take an algae, which is huge, like this intense algae stuff. I do this foot detox with this like ionic bath foot detox, which is actually disgusting.
What comes out? Yes.
It's insane. Like I did it for the first time a couple months ago, and my husband came home from work and he looked at the bath and he goes, what is that? That's disgusting. He's like, I'm going to puke. And I was like, oh geez. So I do that.
I'm wondering, has Freddie ever done the foot bath? Like I would love to see the difference between what comes out of his body and what comes out of yours. So you guys had a double date doing that?
I just said to him the last time I did it, I go, you're doing it this weekend. He was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. So back to what else are you doing?
Well, I go to physical therapy, and she does. Have you ever heard of the vagus nerve?
Well, yes.
So like when your body is under chronic stress, you got nerves in your neck. And so my physical therapist, she's like a head and neck specialist. And she gives me this neck massage and shoulder massage that's like on another level.
Yeah.
Like when she first did it, I was like, what? And she's like, I'm a head and neck specialist. So that is huge. And I kid you not, for like 3 days after the massage, I'm like this, like a wet noodle vegetable. Like it's incredible. Oh my gosh, what else do I do?
I love that. But I do love that you're marrying Western.
Yes.
Western and Eastern medication, because like I am a huge fan of, it's not one thing.
No.
It's all of every little habit, every little thing that you do stacks to give you the results that you're looking for. And I love that you've been focused on your gut and the gut brain connection. I love that Mood Plus is helping you to manage the stress and the overwhelm and just the craziness of life.
I was reading about trauma the other day, and it said a lot of people who have dealt with like chronic trauma, they can handle like really stressful big things, but it's like the small things that stress them out. And I was like,
hello,
that's textbook. Like if they, like I'm going to the oncologist tomorrow, and if they were like, okay, we got to go in for a surgery tomorrow, I'd be like, okay. But like sometimes getting dinner on the table at 6:00 stresses me out. And I'm 100%. Like, dude, I'm like textbook trauma girl.
Yes. Like I remember sharing in the years, or really in the months after Jason died.
Yeah.
And that was like the most traumatic thing I have ever been through. I could handle I got 3 soccer practices. Everybody has to be at the same place within 5 minutes time. You were there, you were on time, you had shoes, you had a snack, you had all the things. But we come home and we're out of milk, or you spill your milk on the floor and I've lost it. The little things, like the dumbest things. And then my kids would look at me like, what are you? Are you a lunatic? Like we just did all of these amazing things. And then we got home and over the dumbest thing, you've lost it. And it is textbook, high cortisol trauma. And Mentibiotics and Mood Plus have helped to lower your cortisol so that you can lean into using your brain and your logic and be the badass that you want to be.
And be sane.
And be sane, which everyone wants to be.
Right.
Right. So I will, of course, link in the show notes. You can start on Mentibiotics. You can start on Mood Plus. I will link all of the things that Becky has shared. You can grab them on Amazon or wherever she finds them. I will make sure that you have all of the tools and strategies that she's using in the show notes below. But as you continue on this journey, Becky, like we've talked about, acknowledging the hard times, but allowing grace for real life to fit in. How do you do it all?
I have to manage my energy budget. I had to downsize my life. I still have to downsize my life, and I live by priorities. And I say no a lot. I have to, you know, I mean, when you have 2 kids, I help my husband with real estate. And the funny thing is like all the stuff that I deal with all my appointments, like when I go to the oncologist tomorrow, I'm not there for 30 minutes, or an hour. Like it's not a nail appointment. Like I could be there all morning. So between it's literally a part-time job, and sometimes it's a full-time job. Like next week I've got a bone scan, which is like pretty much an all-day thing because they have to inject you and then you have to wait 3 hours, then you have whatever. And then Tuesday and then Wednesday I've got stuff, and it's a part-time / full-time job sometimes dealing with all this stuff. So I just live by my priorities. And I live by and here's the thing, Dana, is some days I wake up, like yesterday, I was awesome. Like I did a million things. I rocked it out. I went grocery shopping. I had an event at my kid's school. I had did a million loads of laundry, like all this stuff. And then there's other days I wake up and I'm like, okay, we're going to look at the to-do list and we're going to pare it down to only what has to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. For coping mechanisms as you work through trauma, you've talked about downsizing your life. And in doing that, it does mean saying no to things. And that can be hard in seasons.
It used to be hard for me. It's not anymore, because just I don't know what it's like to lose a husband. You know what I mean? So you probably had to do things and put boundaries on your life. And you were probably like, I don't care because I have to do this for my 3 boys.
Yeah.
And so when I put boundaries on and I say no, and I have to form my life, next week there's a lot going on with different appointments. And I'm like, okay, everything has to be built around these appointments. And I had a friend that got really mad at me one time about something. And I said to her, you don't understand. I said, if I have a scan or an appointment, or if something pops up, I said, the only thing in our life that gets taken care of is our children. Obviously, we can't drop the ball with them. They have to get fed. They need their bath. They need, homework, all that stuff. I said, everything else, I kind of go into psycho focus mode, where when the spot popped up on my chest and my arm, and it was the beginning of summer, I remember going into that going, oh, I can't wait for summer. I need a break. I need a refresh, whatever. And then everything just literally went to the wayside.
Yeah.
And all we had, the whole summer was radiation tables, scanning machines, hospital stays. But we're dealing with life and death here. When I was having the spinal tap, someone sent me a text and they were like, because my cousin took my kids up north for a couple of days, which is the hugest blessing ever. Because I was in the hospital, and someone sent me a text and they were like, are you missing your kids? And I was like, no, because we have to focus on this. Because if I have cancer in my spinal fluid, this is probably going to be my last Christmas. You know what I mean? We're dealing with life and death. We're not dealing with football games and birthday parties.
Yeah. But not everyone understands that. And we'll go back to your point of saying it's not a nail appointment. It's not 30 minutes. The biggest decision is what color do I pick? And I'll be out in an hour. And sure, I'd love to meet you for dinner after that. You walk in and you don't know how long you're going to be there. So like for the woman that is trying to support someone that is going through this, so instead of being frustrated that you're saying no, how can we encourage her to show up for her friend better?
So number one, showing up is, the woman came up to me and she said, I want to acknowledge what has happened, but I also know you want to talk about other things. And that's key. Like I was like, you deserve a gold medal.
Yes.
Because when you're going through trauma, just like,
Yeah.
there was a huge time when people would see me and they wouldn't say anything. And I would get mad.
Right.
And
because you're like, I'm not invisible. I feel that.
Thank you. And then there was times when people saw me and they would ask me a ton of questions. And there was times, and there still is times, when it's like, I don't want to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
I'm at my son's basketball game. Like, I don't want to talk about everything that just happened. I don't want to unpack that right here. Like, I'm not doing that right now. So my husband got really mad at me one day and he was like, you get mad when people don't say things. And then you get mad when people ask you a lot of questions. He's like, what is it? And then my friend came up to me and she said, I want to acknowledge what happened, but I know you want to talk about other things.
Yeah. That's what the answer is.
And then that's the answer. And then supporting someone is, what do you need? Tell me.
And having the aptitude on the receiving end of that to actually say what you need.
Yes. Because there was times when people are like, what do you need? And I was on the couch going, I just need sleep, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I need another painkiller, whatever.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side of that, I've never been one to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I have a cleaning lady now, and that was way outside of my comfort zone. Yeah. But like, I like my house clean. I function better when it's organized. Like if it's a mess, I don't feel good. I don't feel like I can't function well. Yeah. So I have a cleaning lady now. Like if you're going through trauma, you have to be able to ask for help. If someone offers to do a meal train, take it. Yeah. Or maybe you don't like the meal train. I know you hated it.
Right. Well, it all depends. I think if looking back, hindsight always being 2020, right? Looking back at that, I think I could have edited the meal train or asked for more things specifically, like, hey, we're clean eaters. I really like vegetables and a protein and a whatever. And people would have probably loved. I know that if you would give me directions, like this is my favorite recipe, or I like these 10 things, I would have been all over it. I'd be like, all right, Becky, I'm making it. I'm here to go. But in that moment of stress and overwhelm, I didn't have the confidence to say, hey, Becky, this is good, but I really would prefer X, Y, Z. I didn't feel like I could come back and say anything. So then I accepted a lot of meals and I literally packed a lot of them up and drove around and gave them to homeless people. Like it was a project for me to do, because I was like, I don't want whatever this is, but I also don't want it to go to waste. But I think there's an opportunity in there in having a best friend, someone. So if you're listening and you know someone who has someone that has died and they need a go-to, they need a point person. And I didn't necessarily have that person. And so I think maybe you just need coaching in that moment, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I was too overwhelmed with everything else that I was dealing with that I was like, I don't care. I'll not eat before I do that. And my kids enjoyed, a lot of the meals. So it all was for good intent. I didn't love it.
And didn't you feel like too, like, and again, I'm not comparing cancer to losing a spouse.
No, we're not comparing, like, let's take that off the table. We're not comparing anything. We are having a genuine conversation in hopes of helping someone in this same space to learn from the things. That's where my heart is.
Did you go through, like, I remember you telling me you were in like 2 years of like shock.
Yeah.
Did you have like days or weeks or months plus where you like didn't even really know what was happening?
Oh yeah. Like, it was surreal. It feels surreal. It feels like you're having.
Yes.
It feels like, in my opinion, that you're an outsider.
Yes.
Watching your life take place.
Yes.
And you're like,
Yes.
what is actually happening? And
Yeah.
you want to know what the crazy thing about it is. My senior who's graduating this year is writing his entry essays to college. And he wrote in his essay that for probably 8 years, it took him 8 years to realize that like dad's not coming home. Like he's actually not coming home. Like he even felt like it was a surreal situation. You're an outsider looking at your life happening.
And I think too, like when you're in that, like there was multiple times, like I remember getting home in the 30 days of darkness, we walked in the door and I looked at my husband and I said, I feel like I'm living in a movie right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think too, you talk about like other people supporting you. Like I remember we were at like an event a few months ago, and after the event, people were like, let's go out to dinner, whatever. And I was like, it took everything.
I had to be here.
I had to be here and be around this craziness. And they were talking about, I watched a commercial, they were talking about people in the military who come home from the military. And the guy was like, you have to understand, he's like, you live months with like shooting machine guns and having bullets come at you. And then all of a sudden you come home and people are like, let's go to a birthday party. And the military veterans are like, and I was like, oh, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Like, because when you're like,
it's PSTD.
Right. When you're like literally fighting for your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I wasn't going to talk about this, but when I was in the hospital and I was waiting for my spinal tap results, like I wrote Marco and Gianna letters and I emailed them to Fred and I just said, whatever you do, don't open them. I said, but I just want you to have them just in case.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
Because you don't like, you're dealing with like the trauma of like having to say goodbye to your children is like,
no, it's terrible. It's terrible.
It's terrible. And one of the things that I wrote in the letter, and your kids need to know this too, like about Jason, like I wrote in the letter, I said, just because I'm no longer here doesn't mean that my love for you is gone. And you need to know that.
That's so good.
And then another thing I wrote in the letter, and I'm not going to go into it anymore, is I wrote in the letter and I said, you need to not let this ruin your life.
Yeah.
Life is short.
Yeah.
Do not let losing your mom make you bitter.
Right.
Don't be mad your entire life. Don't waste your life being mad about this.
Right. And I mean, I think that is...
Oh, I wasn't going to go into that.
So good. Well, thank you for going into that. I applaud you for writing the letter and for getting it down on paper. And as I like blot the tears away from my eyes and sniff, right, we're both like sniffling, but understanding that you still, if they still have life to live, and even you now, you were sharing with me a while ago that you had the opportunity to sit down with a woman who had lost her son. And she was sharing her experience of that. And she was like, it's been a year and we're walking around living like zombies. And I think that is huge also because their son, and they recognized in that moment, would be furious if he knew that was the way that they were living their lives. Like Jason would be furious with me if I didn't get up, grow forward. So you have to do the work to grow forward. And I'll come back to having stress resilience and stress aptitude, because like that is a huge part of my journey and my ability to say, okay, I am going to grow forward, but it's not just like, oh, I'm going to flip the switch and I'm going to be done with grieving and I'm going to, feel better.
So 2 things is you talk about growing forward and like having the strength to continue. Like when we were in the 30 days of darkness and we were like, oh my gosh, we can't even find a doctor I remember driving in the car and Fred goes, babe. So we left the appointment where the doctor didn't want to do the surgery because it was so bad. And I'm like driving in the car, I've got this neck brace on, and he goes, babe, don't worry, we're going to find someone to do the surgery. And I remember I like didn't even have the energy or the mental capacity at that point to like have a conversation. But I remember thinking like, Fred, this surgery like if he makes one wrong move, I'm paralyzed. Like this
Yeah.
is not like a general surgeon, like fix the cut on my finger. Where we were and to where I needed to get to was such a mountain and so overwhelming. Like I remember when I was preparing for the cervical fusion and I had to do these x-rays, I had to do an EKG, and I had to do all this stuff. And I didn't even know why I was doing it because things were moving so fast. I didn't even have the opportunity to process what was happening. But like, it was so overwhelming getting to that surgery. After the surgery, I said to Fred, I came home and I was like laying on the couch and I was like, Fred, I forgot about the cancer because I was so focused on getting through the surgery. So my point in saying all this is baby steps, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I'm an alcoholic and I need to like become sober. It's so overwhelming. Baby steps.
One step. Yeah.
1 step.
1 hour at a time. 1 hour at a time. It will get you there.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So for the woman listening, for your stress resilience, for your ability to calm the overwhelm, like what do you do? Like what are tips that you would share for helping her?
Writing a to-do list. Like that's huge. Like when I feel very overwhelmed, like the holidays are coming and I don't know about your family, but there's like parties and a million gifts and whatever. And I'm like, I got to put it on paper. You got to write your to-do list down, because there was a lot of times, Dana, where I like didn't like a normal person like gets up, they brush their teeth, they get in the shower, they make breakfast, they whatever. Like when things were really, really bad and when you're decimated by the chemo, you don't have the automatic like going through your day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I literally would get up in the morning and I would go, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Now I need to get myself some food because I know I need to eat.
Yeah.
Like, and then I would eat. And there were times, I'm going to be honest with you, there were times when I was too tired to eat. Like I physically like could not like make myself something to eat or just grab an apple and eat it because I was too tired to do it. I was like, I'd rather just not eat.
Yeah.
I mean, I was really skinny because I didn't eat for like 6 months. That's the one good thing about chemo.
The diet no one wants to go on.
Yeah.
You're so silly. Oh my gosh. Okay. So for the woman just receiving a diagnosis, like what if someone comes home from the doctor and they're like, okay, you have a cancerous nodule, you need to do radiation and chemo. What advice do you have for her?
Number one, I said this earlier, like I marry Eastern and Western medicine.
Yeah.
Okay. And I had people beg me not to do chemo.
Yeah.
Like people were like, don't do the chemo. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do whatever I need to do no matter what. But chemo is horrible. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
The second thing is take it one step at a time, one day at a time. You have to believe in your ability to heal and God's ability to heal you as well. Because getting a diagnosis is devastating.
Yeah.
Like you talked about, you're like, wasn't the original plan for my life. Like I said to Fred the other day, I was like, I wonder where I would be right now if this didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like I wonder where I would be in my life. And of course, Fred, like taking down the temperature, he was like, babe, he was like, would it be, he goes, I know you spend a lot of time at the doctor's. He's like, but would it be that much different? He's like, we're raising 2 kids right now. He's like, you're still doing all of the stuff you need. Right. He's like, you're still doing everything that you need to do as a mom and to raise 2 kids. He's like, yes, I know that. I almost feel like I live a double life. He's like, I know you spend half your life at the doctor's. He's like, but chill. But in my mind, I'm like, where would we be?
Yeah.
If these past 5 years I was living a normal life and not spending my days at the oncologist and in scanning machines.
Yeah. But you are doing all of the important things that you need to be doing. And again, like you are sharing your story. And I am just so appreciative that you're here to chat through all of it and to help the other women that find themselves in this situation or have a friend in this situation. And we all need help and we all need tools and strategies to show up at our best through all of that.
And Dana, people want to help.
Yeah.
Truly. Like when people say, like, I remember I had an infusion a couple months ago and my physical therapist was like, I bring over the best dinners, whatever. And I could tell she like really wanted to do it. And I was like, awesome. Where
Great.
before I would be like, no, 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 we're fine.
Yeah.
Now, like when people want to help, I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Great. And people like, it makes them feel good when they
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's one really great takeaway, if you don't take anything else away from this conversation, is that if you are struggling with accepting help from others, knock it off. Like, knock it off and allow others to. You are not only missing the blessing yourself, but you are preventing that person from being a blessing. And I truly feel that, because I've been like, you and I are like such good friends because we're so similar. I've been the woman that's like, I really, really want to bring you dinner, and maybe like, nah, I'm good. I'm
Right.
fine. I'm
Right.
over here. I got
Right.
it.
Right.
I maybe don't have it, and we're maybe eating cereal for dinner, but I'll be like, no, we're okay, because it makes me feel uncomfortable because you're going out of your way. And now if you bring me dinner, do I have to bring you dinner? Like, how does this work? And it's this whole like crazy cycle that we put ourselves into. And it's like, stop the madness. Just allow people to be helpful and give yourself the confidence and the ability to really ask for help when you need it. Because to your point, people do, not everyone, but there are people that do genuinely want to help.
Oh, 100%.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
thank you so much. But I remember, and I don't know how long you have been on Mood Plus, but I remember you voice chatted me like 3 or 4 months ago, and you were like, or whatever, however many months ago, you were like, wait, is this going to help me with balancing like the overwhelm? Is this going to help me be less anxious? Like,
Yeah.
tell me, tell me what it's doing for you and how you feel. And like about your kids, like you've recently just put them on the kids' happy juice. Like, how's this shifted your family dynamic?
So Marco, my son, just started the antibiotics, no joke, like 2 weeks ago, because he was having some like he wasn't going to the bathroom enough. We'd be like, Marco, when was the last time you went to the bathroom? He was like, oh, last Wednesday. And I'm like, oh, no. 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 So he just started, but the mood, I feel like, well, because number one, they put me in menopause. So I'm in medical menopause. So that right there is like, whoa, that can do a number on your emotions. And then obviously 4.5 years of trauma and chemo, all of the things. I feel like the mood just levels me out.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a zombie. It's not like taking a Xanax, which I do before my surgeries.
Yep.
Like it's
and rightfully so.
Right. Like, I say that like it's such a routine thing. Like, oh, the Xanax before my surgeries. But like the mood just chills me out a little bit.
Yeah. It gives you the mental bandwidth to show up the way that you want to show up. I feel like for me, when I found these Happy Juice and Mood Plus maybe 4 or 5 years after Jason died, and it was a game changer for how I was managing my emotions. It was less of a roller coaster, or less of a, holding on by a thread. Like, I'm riding this roller coaster and we're going at Mach 10 and I'm literally holding on by a thread, to where now it's like you can manage that better.
Well, in the mood, like the 5 o'clock hour, like yesterday, like Marco was doing homework. He was trying to he needed to go to basketball practice. And Gianna was like all in my hair and she was hungry and I was trying to cook dinner. Like, I'm going to take mood at like 3 o'clock. The kids get home at 3:30. And then my evening
is nicer.
It's like I almost had a glass of wine, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Without it, just chill.
Yeah. It's just
like,
chill.
Right. Like, oh, you just threw pancakes at Marco's face. And then like the other day, like she threw pancakes at his face and then he threw water all over her. And that happens. And I'll be like, great.
Yeah.
I don't
pick it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It
rather than hollering at somebody or letting it rile you up, which doesn't serve anyone a purpose.
And then you get tense inside, and then
and that doesn't serve anyone a purpose. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing yourself. I love you.
Love you too.
Yes. And until next time.
Yes.